From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here with you on a Thursday, and I certainly hope you weathered the storm last night. And if you're getting a signal this morning, then your antennas or cable was not knocked out. And I'm glad to say that no one was seriously injured or hurt in what happened last night. But there's trees down, power lines, still down in some areas, so be safe making your way out. But little exhale there, like, not as bad as maybe we had feared. So join us for the big show this morning. We're going to open up the phone lines as always, and this is a chance for you to call in, voice your opinion on some recent high-profile cases we'll touch on that we've talked about with our guest, as well as if you have questions or comments about malpractice. If you feel as though you have an issue regarding a doctor or a hospital that didn't go right and you're wondering maybe if you have a case, well, this morning's your chance to get an answer to that with our guest. He's a regular here on the show, and I dare say, I can call him my friend. I don't know if he would call me his friend. Maybe I'm just a convenience for him. I don't know. I hope not. I hope it's more than that for Clint Kelly. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you. Yes, I'm your friend.
All right. So I've learned so much from you over the years. We've been doing this for a while.
Years.
We have. Yeah. We have, and I appreciate you coming on. As you know, Clint is one of the top malpractice attorneys in the entire state, and it's good to have you on today.
Well, it's good to be here, and we talked a little bit before we began. That nurse bought story won't go away, will it?
No. We'll open up the lines, and folks can sound off on that or ask questions, but I just wanted to get your take on this, because we did talk in the days after the trial, and there was a lot of reaction to it. What do you think now? We're removed several weeks from this verdict where she was convicted, and there was so much of an outcry. What impact do you see it at this point having on what you do and maybe the medical profession?
I skimmed through the comments. There were 900 of them as of 2 weeks ago, and I quit counting after that. But I think it was about 80-20, 80 in support of her, 20% in support of the prosecution, and of course, the family as well. I think the ramifications of this are going to be long-standing. First of all, as I told you, I don't think there are going to be any more prosecutions like this again.
Okay.
I think that's the message that's been sent. Other district attorneys across the country are going to look at this and say, in my judgment, we don't want any part of this. I think another possibility from this is going to be less disclosure, more hiding.
That's the biggest concern.
To try to keep these mistakes or reckless behavior from ever getting to the surface, for fear that these healthcare providers could wind up in the criminal system as well as the civil justice system, which is a shame. It's going to make life tougher on my clients. I don't mind. It's my job to uncover medical negligence when it occurs, but the people who are hurt, people who die, who need compensation, it's going to make it harder for them to get compensation, because the truth is it's very difficult sometimes to find, and when you have to really dig it out, it makes it a lot tougher and a lot more expensive.
Now, Redonda Vaught, just for folks maybe who are joining us that missed it, she was convicted of making
by the way,
series.
She admitted. She came forward and told the truth. We can never forget that. She did.
She did not cover it up, like you said, and you fear that may change things moving forward. But she was convicted, and a series of mistakes that led to the death of a woman, and she now is a convicted felon. She'll be sentenced in May. My opinion on this, I don't know if you would agree, is that the judge will be in charge of sentencing. She could face, if everything was consecutive and they went with the max, up to 6 years. My opinion is she won't do any jail time, is that she'll likely be given 2 years probation. And then it's an expungable offense. What do you think?
I agree 100% with everything you said. I think one of the questions we don't know now is what will the district attorney recommend as a sentence. But if you look at what she's lost as a result of this prosecution, and let's not forget she also went in front of the Board of Nursing, had to pay a fine, have her license suspended. I think when you look at the big picture, it just seems to me from looking at 30,000 feet that she has been punished enough. That's my sense of it.
In your mind then, what and when would a nurse or some medical professional deserve to be prosecuted criminally? How bad does it have to be? I guess intentional damage, obviously you prosecute. If a nurse intentionally does something to hurt a patient, nail them criminally, or intentionally. Redonda Vaught did not mean to hurt this woman. It was a mistake, and she admitted that.
Right.
Is there any level of mistake, in your opinion, that could ever be so reckless that it would merit prosecution?
Now, this is my opinion.
Okay.
Of course, I don't say that this is necessarily what the law would be. I think the dividing line is, of course, intent.
Okay.
But also, is there impairment?
Oh.
Alcohol, drugs, an intoxicant that affects the healthcare provider's ability to provide care. I mean, to me, it's no different than DUI. If you go into the workplace and you're impaired and you perform surgery, to me, that's no different than getting behind the wheel drunk and killing somebody. So that's where I would draw the line, is intent or impairment. Otherwise, I just firmly believe the civil justice system is built to handle those types of medical errors or even reckless conduct. The criminal justice system is reserved for people who intend harm or for people, for healthcare providers who are impaired.
I got you. Oh, I got you. Even though into the criminal system, in other things outside the medical field, there is reckless homicide. You can be prosecuted criminally for recklessness behind the wheel of the car where there's no intent, and maybe you're not drunk, but you're texting while driving or something like that. Is the nursing, are nurses and doctors allowed to be held to a different standard than, you know, and maybe be immune to that kind of prosecution, whereas you and I, as a driver behind the wheel of a car that kills someone because we were texting, could be prosecuted?
Yeah, I don't believe that there should be special rights for one professional versus another. I just think that it's a matter of prosecutorial discretion.
Okay.
And again, I'm not second-guessing what the district attorney did. All I'm saying is, in my mind, that's how I see the dividing line. But we can never forget that the jury found her guilty
pretty quickly.
And so the evidence was there. It's really a question of, do you enlist the criminal justice system to deal with what is deemed to be reckless behavior? And I've already said what my concerns are about that.
Yeah, but in the big picture here, too, I think you hit it on the head. What you do as a malpractice attorney is civilly, and you hold them responsible. A lot of the nurses, especially who support RaDonda Vaught, say, look, yeah, the mistake was made here, but she's taking the brunt of it. And the big question is, all right, these mistakes happened at Vanderbilt. And they're like, well, what about the medical center that's involved here? Should they not bear some responsibility? Now, I guess they probably, even though it was not made public, made a civil payment, I would think, to the family. I don't know what that was.
That's highly likely. What Nurse Vaught's defense was, and I'm using my own language for this, but that it was a system failure and that she was set up to fail.
Okay.
And I think that's probably what's hidden within this onion. If we peel back the layers, should Nurse Vaught be found criminally responsible if she was set up to fail by a hospital system that is either insufficient, inadequate, or puts her in a position where she can fail? Should she be the one that bears the responsibility for that? I'm just raising the question. Again, I was not at trial. I don't know all the evidence. But when you read the comments from the other nurses, a common denominator is, look, we're underpaid. That's true. Overworked. That's also true. And they're put in a position where they have to do a certain amount of work at a certain amount of pace, and the margin for error is thin, and they're put in that position because of the hospital. That's what I read in the comments. And so they're saying, why are we the ones getting stuck with criminal liability, and a hospital like Vanderbilt, they can just write a check and walk away?
Right.
And let me tell you, that's a big point, and it's a tough one to answer. As a trial lawyer, I have sympathy for that argument.
All right, listen, we can take some phone calls on that as we go through. It's been a couple of weeks beyond, but I think he's absolutely right. It's going to have an impact one way or the other. You know, I would say, Clint, at least 2 or 3 times a week I get messaged on Facebook with people asking me about cases that maybe they'd like to bring to you. And you know, I've referred some to you when they just have questions, because I'm not the legal expert, but that have questions about malpractice cases. And before we go to the break here, and we're getting some calls now, we can talk more about the Vaught case. But remind folks again what medical malpractice is. And it's pretty clear what happened in the Vaught case. While we can dispute whether it was criminal or not, that was malpractice.
Yeah, it is. And to use that as it's a good lesson or teaching moment here. It's where a healthcare provider violates a safety rule, which we call the standard of care. Some refer to as a medical mistake, others refer to as a medical error that causes a major injury, a serious injury, or death, as in Nurse Vaught's case where someone dies. Those are the types of cases that I take. And the reason why I say serious injury or death, if it's a temporary injury or an injury that's not particularly serious where the patient can go back to work, the patient can pay their medical expenses, juries just don't compensate for those cases. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah.
So we have to be very particular on the types of cases that we take to make sure the juries are willing to compensate and provide justice.
Before we go to the break, Melanie just called in. We'll take one of the calls now and get this under the belt before we go to the break. Melanie, good morning. Hi. What's on your mind, Melanie?
Hey, good morning. I disagree with Attorney Kelly about how situations like the Vanderbilt nurse should be handled with leniency. I believe that particularly as a nurse, see, here's the problem. There's a difference between, say, someone who's responsible for cleaning a building versus taking care of somebody's life. And that person has a license, and at the very least, they should use common sense and care. And I don't think that the system failed the nurse. I think the nurse was apathetic on that particular day. Maybe she had something else on her mind, who knows. But she did not show the standard of care that a nurse should. And remember, this woman lost her life. That woman's life is as important as the nurse's. So I don't think she should get probation. I think she should go to jail for the full 6 years or whatever the max is. Thanks.
Hey, thank you for your call, Melanie. And listen, what Melanie just said is, I think, a reflection of, I don't know what they feel about sentencing, of the jury. And so many of these nurses that I've heard from, I think, make excellent points, but I wonder how many of them actually sat through and watched, and we streamed it, the entire trial, including all the evidence. And there was a jury of peers here who heard everything, Nick. I mean, there was a Clint and Nick's other legal analyst, and heard everything, and came back with a guilty verdict. And I think felt that she was reckless that day.
Yeah, and we have to respect the jury verdict. I don't think I really disagree with Melanie that much, except on the sentence. I think 6 years is ridiculous. There are people that mug people in the streets at the ATM machine that don't get 6 years. I just think
she has no priors, too.
Judge isn't going to do it anyway.
No.
And let's remember, too, that it was a compromised verdict by the jury. They didn't convict her of the
That's right.
charge.
It was not reckless homicide.
It was negligent homicide, yes, which is what Melanie said, a deviation from the standard of care. So it was, instead of it being a deviation in the civil system, it was a deviation that led to a felony. And again, I'm not second guessing what the district attorney did. I just think if you look at the big picture up to this point, I think she's been punished enough. That's just my personal opinion. Melanie's probably in that 10 to 20% of comments.
You're right. I was going to say that's where she falls.
Yep.
But the vast majority, 80%, I think, did not like the fact that she was prosecuted. But there were nurses who contacted me on Facebook privately who said, "Look, I didn't want to post on there because my peers are going to see what I have to say, but I've been a nurse all these years. I watched this trial from beginning to end, and what I saw disturbed me to the level of what they felt was negligence.
I told you what my nursing expert said. She said exactly the same thing. She said, Clint, this is bad care. I
mean, it's beyond, and yes, Vandy may bear some responsibility, but they pointed it at her, but they didn't want to go public with it. So there's a core of some professional nurses who said, look, this is wrong. I'm a nurse, and I'm watching this, and Redonda Vaught was way out of line here, and it seems like that's what the jury came back with, but I do agree with you. Look, she's never going to be a nurse again. Okay, her career in this is over.
She paid a fine.
She paid a fine.
Lost her license. What's
really gained by locking her up? You saw her talk. This is a woman I don't worry is going to go out and do any damage to anyone else. She can't be a nurse anymore. I just don't see locking her up. It doesn't feel right to me.
She's a convicted felon.
Yeah.
Again, you see now the reason. You see the foundation for why there was a prosecution.
Right.
And I talked about this last show. The way Miss Murphy died, to me, is the straw that broke the camel's back. I think if this had been a painless death or a quick death or whatever, and I know it sounds a little bit callous, but I don't think there would have been a prosecution.
Remind folks just the death. It was a paralytic.
She was given a paralytic awaiting imaging, and what that paralytic does, it takes away your ability to talk, it takes away your ability to breathe, it takes away your ability to even communicate with someone. So she's given the injection. According to the evidence, Nurse Vaught leaves, and she begins to lose her ability to breathe and slowly suffocates over the course, I think, was 6 minutes. That's my best recollection.
So she's conscious and cannot alert anyone to her plight, and she's sitting there suffocating to death.
She's dying.
She's dying.
And I'll tell you that I know from previous cases, because I had a case somewhat similar to this, it is extraordinarily painful to suffocate to death slowly.
So scary. And she was supposed to be given an anti-anxiety medicine, to help her deal with a scan.
Versed, she was given, and she got VE Vecuronium.
Yeah. Yeah, we cannot forget the victim as ever. That's just awful. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, we can take more calls. Your thoughts, if you agree with Melanie, disagree, want to ask about that. Also, if you have a question or comment about a malpractice case, we'll get into more details, some other things that Clint's working on as well. If you'd like to jump in, we'll take your calls right after this. Stay with us.